Hello everyone, today we're in Whittier installing an Owens Corning system. We installed a GAF system with the neighbor and they were so happy that they recommended their next door neighbors, which we are doing now. The Owens Corning system is very similar to the GAF system. They just named their components differently. As we go along, I'll give you the names and show you how they are installed. Right now, let's go up on the roof and see what we got. Okay, so in the city of Whittier, they require that you install plywood if you do not have plywood already on the wood deck. In most cities, they would accept this 1x decking, but Whittier, for fire safety, they claim, require that we install plywood on top of this. It's an added expense, but you can't fight City Hall. As you can see, we nailed down the plywood. As I mentioned earlier, the city of Whittier requires us to put plywood decking on top of 1x. In most cases, we install radiant barrier plywood. In this case, it's called 𝐘𝐨𝐿. So the difference between this sheet of plywood and your standard OSB plywood is this 𝐘𝐨𝐿, which it makes the plywood more energy efficient. Okay. The other thing I want to go over is if you notice we have our red chalk lines running across here. And the reason we run these chalk lines is to identify where the rafters are. Whenever installing plywood, even though we know there's decking underneath, we need to secure them by nailing them directly onto the rafters. Okay. Now, our nailing pattern is 6 inches on the edges and 12 inches on the inside. The other thing that's important to know when installing plywood is that you want to leave about, well, here in California, we are required to leave about 1/8 of an inch in between the sheets. And you do that to prevent the bowing effect during expansion. So that's what you see here. We talked about the nails, we talked about the space between them and the plywood itself. That's pretty much it. As you could see by looking at the rest of the roof, we pretty much have it complete. We always talk about a system. In this particular case, we are installing an Owens Corning system. And it begins with the manufacturer starter. In this particular case with Owens Corning, it's called the Starter Strip Plus. Now you'll notice that I'm looking upside down because the way it was loaded, it was loaded upside down, which is another important point to mention. If you turn around and you see, we ordered our synthetic underlayment. You'll notice that there's 4 rolls. This is overkill for this type of roof. Okay, we need to put double underlayment because it's not 4 and 12 pitch. Here in California, if you don't have a 4 and 12 pitch, you're required to put double underlayment. When that happens, we like to use a number 30 felt, or the tar paper, if you will, first, and then we put our synthetic underlayment. That gives us the best protection. Okay, in this particular case, our distributor just delivered 4 rolls. So we need to fix that. Sometime within the next couple days, or hopefully by tomorrow, we're going to have 2 of these rolls replaced with 11 of your standard 30 rolls. Okay, so the reason why I wanted to point that out is that you have to be on top of everything happening on your job site because mistakes like this are made. And if you don't catch it in time, you lose time and money. Okay, so the next part of the system would be the leak barrier. In this particular case, Owens Corning calls their leak barrier weather flex or weather lock flex or ice and water barrier. Again, following up with mistakes that can be made is that they delivered 3 rolls. We didn't need 3 rolls. I believe that 1.5 should be sufficient. But we'll be dealing with the distributor regarding that. But this is an important part of the system because we're going to put this in the valleys and around all the pipe penetrations. This house doesn't have a chimney or any other penetrations, so it's going to be installed in the valleys and the pipe penetrations. As we move along, you can see that we have our shingles scattered throughout the roof. The shingles that we're installing in this case is the Duration Cool Plus. Now, I jumped over to the shingles because we've already talked about the underlayment that we're using, and we're going to use double number 30 felt, and then we're going to use the Duration Deck Defense. After we do that, we're going to need to install ventilation. I cannot emphasize how important ventilation is. So here are our O'Hagan vents that we'll have to cut the holes for them and paint them to match the color of the shingles. And then the next part of the system would be the ridge caps. In this particular case, for Owens Corning, we are installing the 𝐑𝐞𝐸. As we move along, we'll explain each part of the system for you to understand. But again, I keep emphasizing system because whenever you're installing any kind of roof, you want to stay with a system with one manufacturer. Should you have a point of failure, you're not going to have different entities pointing fingers in different directions. So you have one point of failure. When you deal with advanced roofing systems, you only have one point of failure because you start with us. Now, the last thing I want to point out, which is the additional materials, everything from mastic, paint, and caulking that we're going to be using on this job site, as well as the nails that we install would be cases, the Owens Corning Weather Lock Flex, and basically it's a self-sealing, self-adhering material. Self-sealing meaning that it seals itself directly onto the wood deck. Self-sealing means that when we drive a nail through it, it seals itself around the nail. In this particular roof, we're going to apply it onto the valley and onto the pipe flashings. Part of our system is the drip metal. So we install the drip metal first and then install the leak barrier and the underlayment on top. The reason behind it is if we have any water penetration, it'll just roll down and off the drip metal. Now, most roofers install a 2x2 piece of drip metal. And what that means is it's 2 inches down and 2 inches inside the wood deck. Most roofing manufacturers require that you install at least 3 inches of drip metal onto the wood deck. We install a 2x4, meaning that it's 2 inches down the fascia and 4 inches into the wood deck. That ensures that we qualify for any manufacturer's warranties that are out there. Another important point regarding drip metal is that it's a good practice to overlap the drip metal at least 2 inches. Okay, as mentioned before, this roof is not a 4 and 12 pitch. In the city of Whittier, if you do not have 4 and 12 pitch, you're required to do double underlayment. So what we're doing is we're doing a number 30 felt as our first layer, and then we're putting our Owens Corning deck defense as our second layer. And you will note around the pipes what we're doing, instead of putting the underlayment or instead of putting the leak barrier directly on the wood deck, we're putting it on top of our second layer. So the next part of our system is installing our starter strip. What you want to do with your starter strip is you want to have it about 1/2 inch off the side of the drip metal, so you have a little bit of it coming out. Okay, you want to make sure that you have your adhesive strip at the bottom, so that when you come and install your shingles, they will adhere to your starter strip and create a wind barrier. But the purpose of the starter strip is when we put our shingles down along the edge, water will penetrate through that seam. So if we put our starter strip down, what it'll do is it'll prevent the water coming in the seams from hitting our underlayment. It'll just hit our starter strip and just roll down. So as discussed before, we're installing an Owens Corning system. In this particular case, we're using the Owens Corning Duration Plus shingles. This particular color is Mystic Gray. So the Owens Corning shingles have something that's different from most other manufacturers, which is what they call the Sure Nail Strip. So this strip is intended to make sure that the roofers know exactly where to put their nails on. And it also gives you better protection when you nail the shingles on. In this particular case, in this area, we use 4 nails per shingle. If we were in an area that has a higher wind rating, we'd use 6. Okay, so now we're down to the valley. As you saw in the previous segment, is we put leak barrier along the valley, and now we put a double underlayment, and now we're doing the shingles. So you notice that the shingles from this side of the valley have overlapped to the other side of the valley. We're doing the same thing with this other side of the valley, bringing the shingles to overlap. And then what we're going to do is we're going to run a chalk line and cut it in the center. An important thing to notice is that we are putting mastic along the valley side where the shingles overlap. Okay, something that I want to point out to you in regards to our system is, aside from using a leak barrier in the penetrations, in this particular case a pipe, we use the leak barrier, we put our pipe flashing. After we nail down the flashing itself, we put mastic all around it before we put our shingles. So this is a good example. Keep in mind that once we're done, we're gonna paint all the pipes to match the color of the shingles. Okay, so as you can see, our guys are really moving along. One of the things that we discussed earlier was in regards to the pipes and putting leak barrier underneath. So our guys have moved on. Not only has the leak barrier been installed, but you could tell that our pipe flashings have all been installed. We're also installing ventilation here. This particular roof is considered a hip roof. And what that means is that it doesn't have enough ridge to put ridge ventilation. So what we're doing is we're installing 𝐘𝐨𝐿 ventilation because, like I mentioned before, ventilation is super important. On a 100-degree day outside, the attic space will get about 150, 170 degrees. If you don't ventilate that heat, it'll cause a number of negative things. Number one, it'll bake the shingles from the inside, which will nullify the warranty. It'll make the house hotter inside by about 5 or 7 degrees, and it's a perfect environment for mold. Mold doesn't happen overnight or in a week or so, but after a certain amount of time, with that level of heat, you can develop mold, which is obviously a health hazard. So our systems always include ventilation wherever there's an attic area. Now, in this particular case, like I mentioned, we're doing 𝐘𝐨𝐿. So you will note that they've placed leak barrier around the 𝐘𝐨𝐿, and then they put mastic on top. Okay, then they're going to come in and put the shingles. One 𝐘𝐨𝐿 has already been completed, showing the details that we use here at Advanced, which is we actually put shingles on top. Okay, it's okay to not put shingles on top, but we believe this gives it that extra touch. It makes the 𝐘𝐨𝐿 vents appear seamless, and in my opinion, it makes it look really good.
Well, the last part of the installation system is the
Corning hip and ridge, which is called 𝐑𝐞𝐚𝐝. We use a 10-inch wide ridge cap. Now, this is an example of a hip that has not been prepared yet. Over here, you can see a hip that has been prepared. And what I mean by prepared is you have to run a chalk line to cut the excess out and then start nailing your ridge cap. Now notice your ridge cap, it has a nail line and it has an adhesive strip. So essentially what you're doing is you're putting one on top of another with the adhesive strip below your next course. That way it adheres to it and prevents wind from picking it up and blowing it away. Okay, so as you can see, we have finished the re-roof. Couple of points to point out, which is yesterday it was about 97 degrees out and we were here for up on the roof for a while, so I didn't really discuss how to nail the hip and ridge caps. Okay, so I want to take a moment to show you now. We put a nail on each side of the apex. I don't know if you could see it from there. So this is the one on this side, and you open up, and there's another nail on the other side. You will notice that there's some black material there. That's an adhesive that's supposed to adhere to the top ridge cap. Now, the other thing you want to notice is that we have an open nail here. That is a no-no in the roofing industry. You never want to have an open nail. In a situation like this, that we have different hips meeting with a ridge, there may not be an option other than to put a nail there to secure that the ridge caps don't go anywhere. So what you would do in this case is some roofers use mastic. We use caulking, roof caulking, to seal it up so that we don't have any water penetration in this area. The caulking tends to last a little bit longer. You just want to dab a little bit and just go around to make sure that there's no exposure, something like that. I want to point out that we installed our O'Hagan vents. If you look at the pipe flashings, they are all, the pipes and pipe flashings, they are all painted to match the color of the shingle. We also put caulking at the point where the pipe and the flashing meet. Now, some roofers will use mastic. Actually, it's common practice to do that, but mastic tends to crack. While caulking is a little bit more expensive, we find that it lasts longer and it prevents us from coming back to address a leak call in a situation where mastic will have cracked. Another detail that I do want to point out to you guys is that earlier I showed you that we put caulking over an exposed nail. Well, to give it that extra touch, what we do is we put a little piece of shingle right on top of that caulking to give it that extra layer of protection and let it blend in well. Okay, as you can see, we finished the roof and it looks great, but more importantly, it's part of a complete Owens Corning system. Now, the homeowner shouldn't have any issues with this roof for time to come. In this particular case, because it's an Owens Corning system, it comes with a limited lifetime warranty, which means that the homeowner won't have to worry about this roof for about 50 years. I said lifetime earlier. In our industry, the roofing industry, lifetime represents 50 years. But it comes with an ironclad guarantee from Advanced Roofing Systems, which is, as long as it doesn't rain, this roof will not leak.